Hey there, welcome in. Thanks for clicking on play. So I just have one question for you all. Do you like scary movies? If so, you've clicked on the right video. Welcome to my Scream filming location video tour out here in wine country in California. So I'm starting this off where the film starts off at Casey Becker's house. Now, you cannot get to this house, and the grounds on which it is on is right behind me. And if you remember in the movie, it's a long road in, so it's private property. It is not open to the public, but I thought this would be a great place to start the video, kind of give you an idea of what the area around here looks like. And if nothing else, I'll be able to show you the driveway. There is a scene where when Casey is being chased, you see a car making its way down a long road and then turning up a driveway. Well, all of that is on this property, right? Yeah, he says right. So let's talk about it a little bit, okay? It is definitely a gorgeous area out here. You are high up in a mountain in Sonoma County, wine country. So yeah, they chose this house. I don't know how on earth the location scouts found it because it is out here in the middle of nowhere. Drew Barrymore was originally supposed to star in the role of Sidney Prescott, and about 5 weeks before filming was supposed to begin, she changed her mind. And that's when she thought it would be better for her to play Casey, because at that time Drew Barrymore was a pretty big star, and she thought no one would expect that the big star of the movie would be killed in the first 10 minutes of the film, right? So she thought that would sort of subvert the audience's expectations. So yeah, she thought that would be a better way to go. Now, Wes Craven didn't even originally want to direct Scream. After his previous film, Vampire in Brooklyn, didn't do so well, he thought he was done with horror. So they had approached Sam Raimi and George Romero to possibly direct it, but Craven decided to go ahead and direct it when Drew Barrymore accepted the role of the lead. And then 5 weeks before production, she changes her mind. So that's interesting, but it still got us the horror classic that we all know and love. I read that Reese Witherspoon was considered for the part of Sidney, and Joaquin Phoenix was considered for the part of Billy, which is funny. Neither one of them got the role, but they did both star together years later in another film. The name is escaping me at the moment. Walk the Line, I think it was. So that was just kind of an interesting little fun fact. Now, originally, Matthew Lillard had auditioned for the part of Billy Loomis. He had wanted that role originally, but obviously the casting director saw differently. So I think it all went pretty well all around. So I'm going to turn the camera around and give you a look at Casey Becker's, well, not her house, but the property on which that beautiful house sits. So just to give you an idea of what it looks like out here. This is the property, and as you can see, there's a gate up there. So that would be, the entrance to the property where the car drove down that we saw in the film, leading down to the house. So my understanding is the people that own this property really don't want anything to do with the movie Scream. They don't really welcome visitors, certainly not trespassers. I'm staying on the county road here, so I believe I'm not trespassing. I hope I'm not trespassing. But there you can see, that would be the road that you see the parents driving on as they're making their way home that night, as Casey is being brutally attacked by Ghostface. Right there. Gorgeous surroundings here in the middle of wine country. Absolutely exquisite. The drive up here was a little harrowing, so if you ever want to come out here, keep it in mind. Lots of twists and turns and up a mountainous road. There you go. Somewhere back there is the Casey Becker house. Now, Roger Jackson, who was the voice of Ghostface, never actually even saw Drew Barrymore during the filming. He was in another room because Wes Craven, being the brilliant genius that he is, thought that that would have a more powerful impact, a stronger effect. And he was right. So he was in another room in the house. The whole opening sequence of the film was filmed on this property. Nothing about that was filmed on a set. And with him being in another room, you know, it was almost a little more realistic, not being able to see the person behind this voice that was calling and terrorizing you. It worked. It was a terrifying scene. I still can't have Jiffy Pop popcorn without getting a little scared, I'll tell you. And one other interesting little fun fact I wanted to tell you about this place is, since it's a real home, the prop master made a mistake and he forgot to disconnect the phone. So there was a moment where Drew Barrymore was calling 911, and she actually did call 911 several times, I believe, screaming, you know, because she was being attacked. And so finally, the police or 911 or whatever called back and said, "Do you need help? Is there something going on there?" So I think it was kind of an embarrassing moment, maybe for the prop master, but it certainly makes for good lore all these years later to be retelling this story. So this is it, the property of Casey Becker, the late Casey Becker, and the scene that caused sales of caller ID devices to triple after the release of this movie. Yeah, triple. So the 90s were an easier time. People weren't really worried about who was calling them. But after Scream, that changed. People wanted to know who was on the other end of the phone before they picked it up. And that is when the caller ID sales just went through the roof. So that is it from Casey Becker's property. That's all I can say. I hope you enjoyed that, and stick around because I have lots more in store. We're going to go to every location used in the filming of Scream, except there's a couple that you cannot get to. Sidney's house being one of them. The owners don't want anything to do with it. You cannot even pull up to it, sort of like I've done here. It's way up a hill with a gate at the bottom. This one I feel like, you know, I'm not gonna try to ring the buzzer or get inside in any way, but just kind of see what we can see from the road here. So come along for the rest. I hope you enjoy the ride. I promise you, it'll be a scream. Okay, we have made it to Woodsboro High School. Yay! In reality, it is the Sonoma Community Center in Sonoma, California. It is right here on a main road, very busy road, so you have to excuse the road noise. But this is it. This is where all of the school sequences happen. The hallway scenes, the classroom scene, Billy and Sidney's conversation by the stairs, all of that took place in here. So we're going to go inside and I'm going to give you a tour of that. But let's get started out here where another car, where the action first started. After the events of Casey and Steve's murder and the opening of the film, the next thing we see is a tight shot here on the peak of Woodsboro High School, which again is Sonoma Community Center. And then slowly the camera pans out, and over here we see Gail Weathers doing one of her news reports about the murders that occurred the night before. Obviously, you can't replicate that anymore. The shrubbery has grown quite a bit, but this is where that would have happened. And then if we go over here, you're going to see another area that looks quite familiar as well. Right over here. Again, shrubbery has grown immensely or been replaced. But here, gotta keep walking a little bit. It says Sonoma Arts over there. Award-winning, let's see, Sonoma Arts Live Theater, award-winning theater. But in the movie, over that doorway, it had the words auditorium. So let me pan out and show you. There's a parking lot over here, and this is where the school buses were arriving that morning and dropping off all the students. So can't really make it out now, but we see Sidney obviously get off a bus, and then she crosses over behind those bushes, and then she starts kind of walking this way, again with that auditorium sign behind her. And she's kind of wondering what all the commotion is. You know, she sees Gail over there because all this stuff wasn't here. And so she walks this way, and then eventually she meets up with Tatum as they're walking to the front door of the school. And that is when Tatum tells her, "Did you hear what happened last night?" And she's informed about the murder of Casey and Steve. And she says, "Oh no, she sits right across from me in a certain class," which was by design. Stu and Billy did that by design, by murdering one of her, classmates to really kind of rattle her cage. And they make their way over here to the front entrance, and the camera is actually kind of pointing that way as we see them make their way up the path here to the stairs to the school. And if I turn the camera around, you will see there's those stairs. Now, there is a little interesting fun fact about this particular filming location. So originally, they wanted to film Woodsboro High School. They were going to use Santa Rosa High School. But just weeks before production was to begin, the board, the school district, got wind of what the movie was about and decided, no, I don't think we want to be affiliated with that. So at the last minute, they had to scramble and find a new location, and they found the Sonoma Community Center. Thank God, because what would they have done? And I think it actually made for a beautiful filming location. It's gorgeous inside, and you're going to see. And so because of that, if you're kind of paying close attention, in the closing credits, when they're doing the special thanks, there is a mention, said to be a joke, but personally I think it was more one of those like sorry, not sorry situations. And under the special thanks section, they said, "And absolutely no thanks at all to the Santa Rosa School District." Absolutely no thanks at all. And that would be why. That's the story behind that. So let's keep taking a look around. All right, so this is it. This is the hallway where some of that action took place. Now, there was a water fountain there. You have to use your imagination a little bit because it was an older style water fountain, just a white ceramic porcelain water fountain. These little walls weren't there. And you do see these two doors over here, kind of behind the characters, who are all gathering at their lockers. So right over here is where those lockers would have been. It's kind of a tighter shot, so you definitely don't see the windows. It's more of a close-up on their faces. It takes place right here in front of the lockers. There is a moment where Stu looks in a mirror at his forehead. He's been engaging in some pretty strenuous extracurricular activities, and he's checking to see if there's a mark on his forehead that might give him away. So that all happens right here where the lockers are set up. That's where that water fountain was, and again, you see those two doors right back there behind them as the scene is unfolding. And as they're getting ready, then we have a moment, if I turn the camera this way, where somebody wearing a Ghostface costume comes running down the hall this way, screaming, waving their hands in the air. They go running down this hallway. Of course, it's not the real Ghostface, it's just a prankster. And later, the principal has a really stern talk with him. But yeah, this is where that all happened, right here in this hallway. Now, Sidney is a little frustrated at that behavior, that little fun that person was having in the Ghostface costume, so she starts walking over this way. And right as she approaches these stairs, this banister, who does she run into? But Billy Loomis. And so they have a conversation there where he says, "My girlfriend would rather believe I'm a psychotic killer than touch me." And so this is where that all unfolds, and she says, "No, I know you're innocent, I know it's not you." And after they finish their conversation, she goes walking off that way to go to the restroom. Of course, that's not really a restroom back there, that is a dance studio, but this is where it would have been. Once she gets into the restroom, there's some other schoolgirls in there, and they're talking about her, so she hides. They leave. She comes out, and she's attacked by Ghostface. I always wondered for years, how did Billy or Stu get in there? There just wasn't any time. Finally found out it wasn't them. It was a prankster, maybe the same guy that ran through the hallways or one of those. He didn't have a knife with him, so I guess that was a clear signal that wasn't the real Ghostface. And then the next thing we see is Sidney running down this hallway. There's a woman over here that kind of sees her and gives her a look. And she comes over here, and there's this really interesting angle shot where she kind of puts her hand on the banister and goes running down the stairs and turns back and looks up to see if he's still there. So this is where that all unfolded at the Sonoma Community Center. This is room 208 at the Sonoma Community Center. This room was used to portray the classroom where we saw Sidney gazing over at Casey's empty chair. This was right before the principal called her in for her interview. There was a class going on at the time of my visit, but they let me quickly film the room just to show you. When Gail is having a conversation with Dewey a little bit later, trying to get him information out of him, it takes place right out here, and they make their way up these stairs as well. And Dewey proceeds to go up the stairs, and I'm going to show you that, but Gail kind of stays out here. And, she's trying to buddy up with him because she wants intel that the police department might have so she can, break the story. But after she talks about the male viewers that watch her most being in an age range that ends in 24, she asks him how old he is, and he says 25. Then he says, by the way, you're much prettier in person, and then he begins to make his way up these stairs. So he gets about halfway up the stairs and turns around, and he kind of looks at her and he reminds her, I'm 25, but I was 24 for a whole year. So that is where that takes place. This is the main stairway into the Sonoma Community Center as soon as you come in the front door. So this is definitely difficult to, recreate correctly due to all the foliage. But then there's another scene after the principal decides to, close school and send everybody home. Tatum and Sidney start walking out the auditorium door again. And as Tatum and Sidney are making their way down this path, Stu shows up. He soon follows. And they kind of cross in front of this tree, which is very close to the street. So I'm trying to be careful. That is where Stu kind of utters that line that I can't even repeat, like, Kizo, Skiguzo, or whatever. And he's saying, thank you, Sidney, for getting us out of school. So that would have all taken place right about here. And they do cross the street. And they continue walking down that sidewalk and talking about the party that Stu is having that evening. So let's go across the street. So the reason I wanted to cross the street and follow in their footpaths is there's a point where there's a tree with a very unique horseshoe-shaped marking. And I was curious to see if it's still here. So let's see. I mean, it's been 30 years, right? It could be very different, but I think that would be pretty cool. We'll take a look. So I think I found it, but you gotta have a little imagination here. It's been 30 years. The tree has grown quite a bit, but if you get up here past these leaves, I feel like that's that marking because it was white. It's kind of horseshoe shaped. I think that's it. I can't be certain, but I think that sort of looks like the shape, and it's definitely the right color. So I think this could be it. It's a little bit down from the school, but not too far. All right, so if you ever decide to come to the Sonoma Community Center to do your own Scream location tours, don't forget to go down into the lower level because there's this bulletin board full of Scream memorabilia, nods to the film that was filmed right here. So let's go take a closer look. Oh, they have tote bags for sale for $25. I might have to get one of those. Or is it pre-orders? I don't know. I'll have to check that out. Ghostface. Running up the stairs. Welcome to Woodsboro High. Limited edition screen print. It's really loud here today. We have a Ghostface mask. Oh, and look at this. We have, pardon the noise, Woodsboro High School plaque from the movie. An actual plaque given to Dan Casabon by the Screen Production Company, designed to mirror the SCC Historic Building plaque, Sonoma Community Center historic plaque located outside to the right of the front entry. So there it is, Woodsboro High School, National Register of Historic Places. Very cool. And over here we have a photo commemorating that classroom scene that was filmed in room 208. And we have a photo, that we see when we first see the school from the front, and we have that encounter with Sidney and Billy at the second floor, in the second floor hallway. It looks like there's a podcast dedicated as well. So I have just arrived at Healdsburg Plaza in Healdsburg, California, where the fountain is from the famous fountain scene. So I am going to give you a tour of that. It is really beautiful here. Kind of place you could really spend some time. The fountain, the benches, the park, it's really, really lovely. And there's some buildings around the square here, that one in particular, that you see when everybody's closing, all the shops. The shop owners are closing early due to the curfew, and you see them all shuttering their businesses. Pretty sure that is one that we see in that scene. I remember those arches. Anyway, let me give you a tour. Healdsburg Plaza. Healdsburg Plaza. Yeah. So when this sequence begins, we get a glimpse of these two light fixtures up here. It's actually one pole, but two fixtures overlooking the gazebo. Of course, I can't get the shot they had. They were really tight on the lights, and you could see the gazebo in the background. But just to give you an idea of the fact that that is where this was filmed. And then the camera pans to the right, and that is when we see our gang hanging out at the fountain after having been released from school. The principal has closed school out of concern for everyone's safety. Now when the scene first starts, the camera is up high, and that is when we get our first glimpse of the gang hanging out. And then we come in closer on a tight shot. And then that is when they are all having a very interesting conversation. Now these flower planters were not here at the time. Those have been installed since Scream's production, but there were flower pots there with flowers in them in the same general vicinity. So this is where we see them talking about the murder of Casey and Steve, and the police had interviewed everybody, and that one of the questions they reveal is that he asked everybody if they hunt or if they know how to hunt, and Tatum's like, why would they ask that? Because they want to know if you have the ability to slice and dice. And then there's also the comment about how the killer had to be a male, And of course, Randy is asking questions that really are not sitting well with Sidney. At which point, Stu comes up with that hilarious line, "You better live her alone, live her alone." And then the gang departs, but all of that took place on this gorgeous Healdsburg Square. It really is pretty. Benches everywhere for people to sit and converse, whatever. Well, filming location or no filming location, the Healdsburg Plaza is a beautiful place, and I particularly love the fountain. I'm an Aquarius. I love water. So I thought I would just sit here and recite another fun fact or two for you. First of all, Scream was originally going to be titled Scary Movie, but then the Weinstein brothers, who were producing it with Miramax Studios, they heard a Michael Jackson song called Scream while they were driving in their car one day, and they decided, you know what, that would make a really good title for a horror movie. And so the rest is history. Scary Movie became Scream. In addition, the screenwriter for Scream, Kevin Williamson, he was actually inspired by a series of real-life college murders. These student murders took place in Gainesville, Florida in 1990. They were perpetuated by a man by the name Danny Harold Rolling, who was later dubbed the Gainesville Ripper. Williams was also inspired by, who isn't, John Carpenter's 1978 classic, Halloween. So I thought that was some interesting information as well. Turns out that was Kevin Williamson's favorite movie, Halloween. And finally, director Wes Craven pulled an Alfred Hitchcock by having a cameo in Scream. He was the janitor, seen very briefly wearing the Freddy Krueger sweater, when the principal, he's hearing noises in his office and he thinks the kids are pranking him, and he opens the door and he looks out into the hallway and he says something about "you little shits," and the janitor, who is Wes Craven, dressed in Freddy Krueger sweater, looks up and says, "What'd you call me?" And Henry Winkler's character says, "No, not you, Freddy. You're fine." So I thought that was pretty funny. Just ahead here on the left, we're going to see another shop that was featured during that sequence when we see all the shop owners closing their stores early and trying to head home because there's a psychotic killer on the loose. First I thought it was this one, Mr. Moon's, because of the green poles. But no, the tree indicates that it is actually the one next door to it on the right. It also has those green vertical posts, but what you see there are the double doors, the red and brown doors, which you see in the scene, and of course the tree, which you see very, very briefly as the final customers are leaving the store right before the shop owner closes for the day. I had to stop and get some iced coffee from one of the coffee shops here on the square. I always like to give a little business to a place that I'm visiting for filming locations. Black Oak Coffee Roasters. Quite tasty. Anyway, I was going to say it's kind of interesting the way they would have you believe that when the kids are sitting at the fountain, you know, they left school and they like walked across the street to this fountain. But in reality, this fountain is in Healdsburg, almost an hour away from the Sonoma Community Center that was used to portray the high school. So that would not have been possible. Sidney took the bus. She didn't have a car. So now if the filmmakers had had their original way, you know, the high school would have been Santa Rosa High School, which is definitely closer to Healdsburg, but still not walkable. So obviously they chose this spot because of its scenic beauty. I think they made the right choice. But just another one of those things. Movie magic. Hollywood magic. And it looks like this place is not open right now, but I wanted to show it to you anyway. First of all, notice this line up here. We all scream for ice cream. And look who's peeking out the window. Oh, the one and only Ghostface. So this is an ice cream store right on the Healdsburg Square. Maybe it's a nod to the scene where Dewey is eating an ice cream cone while he's talking to his boss. I don't know. But they definitely embrace the Scream, history that it was filmed here. This logo here with Ghostface coming out of a cone, they have that on a water bottle. I was actually here the other day and I purchased that. It's really, really cute. But I couldn't film that day because the place was packed. The line was coming out the door, and I try not to get people's faces in my videos. So I just got the cup and left. But this is it, Noble Folk Ice Cream and Pie Bar. So if you ever are in the Healdsburg area, looks like they also have locations in Windsor and Santa Rosa. This is a place you might want to check out. Let me see. Oh, yeah. I can zoom in. There is the water bottle I was telling you about. It looks like the image is kind of on the side right now, so you can't see it. If I could just reach over and turn it around. But yeah, it's got the flip top lid. It's really, really cute. You could probably order it online too if you wanted. I know they have a website. So I'm told it's really delicious ice cream. They have other merch as well with the Noble Folk, I can't say that, logo on things. And they even have ice cream like mix, so you could take it home and make your own. Lots of different flavors. So yeah, it's really nice that they kind of embrace the scream, and you know, it works. We all scream for ice cream. So even though this place, you know, it doesn't really have anything to do with the movie, it wasn't in the movie, it wasn't referred to in the movie, it might not have even been here when Scream was filmed, I just think it's nice that they have this nod, I love it, to this classic film that was filmed right here. I love it when businesses embrace that. There's Ghostface. Alright, moving on. Welcome to the Woodsboro Police Station. Some of this work over here, this overhang should look familiar to you, as well as some of these posts and columns. These double doors behind me, those were the double doors that led inside the police station. And it's right here in Healdsburg, California, just kitty corner from the fountain where all the students hung out the morning after Casey and Steve's murder. So this was seen in quite a few different scenes. One notable scene was when Gail was rushing in after Billy was arrested, and she wanted to get the scoop, and of course they were trying to keep her out. Another scene took place on the side of this building when Sidney was sneaking out the side door, and Gail was trying to get the exclusive and ran to meet her. And that's when Gail, offering to send her a copy of her book about Sidney's mother's murder for free, caused Sidney to give her a knockout. So we'll see what we can see over there. And then there was that scene where Deputy Dewey was meeting with his boss right here, right in front of these doors. And Deputy Dewey was having an ice cream cone, probably from the ice cream cone across the ice cream place, across the street. And then his boss was having a cigarette. So they were both like having their vices, if you will. And that is when Dewey's boss told him all the phone calls came from Sidney's father's phone, Mr. Prescott's, and they were going to bring him in, and that Dewey should keep an eye on Sidney and Tatum, which is why he decides to follow them to the party. So let's turn the camera around and give you another look from that angle. So this is actually the street that we see Deputy Dewey driving down. Some of the buildings that we see in the background are kind of obscured by, or the mountains I should say, are obscured by those trees. But he comes down this road and then he kind of just pulls over into a parking space, probably right where I'm standing actually. And Sidney and Tatum get out of the car. It's a little noisy here. They pause for a minute, and then that's when they decide they're going to go grocery shopping. Meanwhile, Dewey goes off and gets that ice cream cone and comes back here and has that conversation with his boss in front of the double doors to the police station. Right there. Now, inside this store, you know, this has obviously been remodeled. I'm told that, I don't know if I can, you see that door right there that's an arch? Supposedly that was a door that you see in the scene where they're having the ice cream and the cigarette. And then that little wall there with the purse, that was, there was like a little billboard hanging there. And then kind of where you see that alcove, can't really point, over there, was where there was like a registration desk for the police station, if you will. So this all was part of the interior of the police station. So where that punch scene takes place, we go to the side of the building. We're going to walk down there, and there's going to be an alley. So I've come to this back alley. So where we were before was up on that corner. That's where the police station was. So you just walk down this side sidewalk and you get to this alley. They do mention in the movie, you know, let's get her out the back, the alley, so she can avoid the reporters. All the reporters, by the way, we see these buildings over here because they're all scrambling. They're all running this way to get over to the front to where the police station is, you know, to try to get the scoop on the story. So all of those buildings are seen as well. So let's go back over here. So the door is no longer here, but there was a door. Well, look who's hanging out with us today. There was a door here. Sidney and Tatum came out. Gail came running this way, trying to get that exclusive they have that quick conversation. That's when Sidney says something about you had to write a book about it, and Gail says, I'll send you a copy, which causes Sidney to just knock her out with one punch. And you do see this post in the movie here. Actually, there's no Ghostface on it at the time, but you do see that post. So this is that alley, which is behind the building that portrays the police station. So you would almost think it's on the side, but it's behind it in this alley here. And right next door, coincidentally, is the real police station. So little quinky dink there for you. I'll send you a copy. One punch. So that is it. That is the Woodsboro Police Station. There's those columns I was mentioning. Right here in Healdsburg, California. Beautiful Healdsburg. Lovely little area. Right off the town square. Alright, so the next location on our Scream tour is this beautiful Victorian home here in Santa Rosa, California. This, as I'm sure you can recognize, is the home of Tatum. It's on that front porch that she and Sidney have a important conversation about maybe coming to terms with her mother and the terms of her death and all of the things that they've been hearing about her. So a couple interesting fun facts about this is when they were location scouting and they found this house, they went upstairs into one of the bedrooms and they found a mask hanging on one of the bedposts. Just an average mask, probably from the Halloween costume store. And it was that mask that inspired them to create the Ghostface mask. It was very much a Ghostface looking mask, but not as with much texture and depth and detail as the one that came to be known as Ghostface, of course. All inspired by an average mask they found up there. Also, that bedroom was used for the scene where Tatum and Sidney are, they're each in their own bed. There's a fireplace when Sidney is spending the night at Tatum's. So that actually did happen up there in the bedroom over there. So another little interesting connection to another great filmmaker, aside from Wes Craven. The scene where they were having breakfast in the kitchen was actually filmed in the house directly across the street. If I turn the camera around and show you this house, you don't see the exterior, of course. They're only using the kitchen. But this was used in a very famous motion picture by Alfred Hitchcock called Shadow of a Doubt. So I just think it's interesting because they used the kitchen to film that breakfast scene, but also what's so interesting about it is when they were making Shadow of a Doubt back in the 1940s, which was Hitchcock's first film made in the States, because he was from the UK, he would often come over to this house on filming breaks, and he would sit on the wraparound porch. He thought it was beautiful. He seemed to enjoy it. So I thought that was a kind of an interesting connection between these two homes, both featured in Shadow of a Doubt was not a horror film per se, but it was definitely a suspense film from Hitchcock. So I thought that was an interesting connection. So let's go take a look at where the girls sat and where that scene took place. So here we are on the side of Tatum's house. And when the scene actually begins, it begins with a close-up on that window up there. There's some speakers and there's music blaring. School's out for summer because, the principal had sent everyone home. Wanted to keep everyone safe, so school was out. Maybe not for summer, but there was a curfew in place. So they were playing School's Out for Summer, and then our camera pans down. And here we see Sidney and Tatum having a conversation on this beautiful wraparound porch right here. It's right there where they're talking about Sidney's mother and all the rumors about her past, and Tatum is trying to help her come to terms with things shortly before they go, grocery shopping for Stu's big party. So that is where it happened. My gosh, the bushes here smell amazing. Absolutely amazing. Not sure what kind of flower this is, but they smell exquisite. So anyway, that is where that would have happened. And then there's a moment when we know that Ghostface is watching them. and we see kind of a shot through the bushes. Maybe a little bit more like that. So right here in Santa Rosa, this beautiful Victorian home, motion picture history took place. So that's gonna do it from Tatum's house here, and we're gonna go on to the next location. So gorgeous house, and I love the aroma here. It's just gorgeous. Beautiful smell, beautiful neighborhood. Okay, on to the next. All right, this next location, there's not gonna be too much I can show you. In fact, this is one location that has actually changed quite a bit. I'm standing in front of what was the video store, where we saw Randy and we saw Stu, and of course we saw Billy hanging out in the horror movie section, right? Which Randy thought was in horribly poor taste. Well, it's not a video store anymore. It's now an Army recruitment center. It's just to give you kind of a look at it. There was, you know, everything inside was completely gutted. The video store closed. It was empty for the longest time. And really there was no signs of its former business. But there was a door over here, and I thought it was a double door that you did see open and close as customers were coming in and out of the video store while all the action was taking place. You know, while Jamie was freaking out over Billy being in the horror section, and he had that moment where he's like, everybody's a suspect. So that all took place in here, but it's now this Army recruitment center, and you can't even like see inside the windows because they're all covered with these Army posters, advertisements. So maybe if you're interested in joining the Army, this would be a place you can come and enroll. So yeah, all of this was, I think it was called Bradley Video Store, but sadly it is no more. So there's not too much I can tell you or show you about that. Can't see inside the windows. We never saw the exterior. We only saw the interior, and that's completely off limits. But I will tell you that this is also in Santa Rosa, California, not too far from the grocery store, actually, where Tatum and Sidney did their grocery shopping. So let's go on to the next spot, shall we? All right, so the next location we are at is the grocery store where Tatum and Sidney go purchase the party supplies, the popcorn, the ice cream, what have you, before heading over to Stu's house. Now, this is a real working grocery store, so trying to be respectful, keep people out of my shot, but I'm gonna turn the camera around and give you a tour of this location. So there's not much to it. This is where the front door is now, over here. And here's all this produce. And when we see Sidney and Tatum, they are kind of walking this way. We see these two different posts, and right here, and we see this siding up here. And that's about all that we see. And then they stop and turn into the front door, which I'm told was originally over here. So the door has been moved over to that other corner. But that's really it. We just kind of see them coming around that corner there and walking this way, and then heading inside the store. So we're gonna go ahead inside the store, take a look at what they saw, where they walked, what they bought, and come along. This will be fun. All right, so here we are on the inside of the grocery store at which Tatum and Sidney go shopping for supplies for Steve's big party. It is aisle 5, that has been confirmed. However, the cases have changed out a little bit. There was frozen things, and now they'd get to the ice cream part, which was actually kind of at the end of this. I'll have to go up further and give you a look at that. So the layout has changed a little bit, but this is still frozen foods. And this is where Sidney was pushing her cart up, kind of all looking forlorn. And I'll go show you the other angle over here. So in the movie, when they get to about here, this kind of goes in a little bit, and as you can see, the configuration has changed. But this would be about where she would stop for the ice cream and turn around and give it to Tatum. And then as they walk away, in the reflection of the freezer, we see Ghostface's face, and we know that he is still following them. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing all of Woodsboro, but there's one more location that I have to show you. As we all know, the movie concludes with a 42-minute sequence at Stu's house. I'm at Stu's house. Spring Hill Estates, they're the owners of the property. You can rent them for weddings and events, and they own some other businesses in town as well, a creamery, a restaurant. So if you're ever in the area, reach out to Spring Hill Estates, and maybe you can come and see Stu's house yourself. It is up a long, winding road. It is a private road, as the sign says, so I would not encourage anyone to just drive up it without having contacted them and made arrangements for a private tour or a group tour or whatever it might be. That is exactly what I did. I reached out to them, and I was actually able to arrange to spend the night at Stu's. Yes. Yes, I'm still kind of pinching myself. I still can't believe it happened, but I spent the night at Stu's house. It was an amazing experience. I went through every room. I even got up in the middle of the night and just walked around in the dark, just pinching myself that this was actually happening. Anyway, I did go through every room in detail, talked about all the different scenes that were filmed in each room, and I am going to put that in a separate video, and I'll provide the link below. So if you're interested in seeing Stu's house as well, go ahead and give that additional video a look. I'm going to wrap this one up right here for now. We'll call this Scream Filming Locations Part 1, and I hope you come back for Part 2 and get that detailed walkthrough of Stu's house. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If you liked what you saw, please give this video a like, and I'll see you on Part 2. It'll be a scream. Bye now.